Hello, wonderful people. Good morning. How are you doing? Welcome to the breakfast show. I am your host, Lilian Thomas, and I am glad that you joined me here today. Today, we're going to have an absolutely fantastic discussion. We'll be talking about tomato farming. So, yesterday we did something on crop production. Today, we are going more specifically into horticultural farming, and I have chosen to start with tomato farming. And I hope it will be a very interesting discussion. You'll be giving me your feedback. If you are a tomato farmer, you can always tell me about your experience. I'd be glad to share that with the other listeners and the other viewers. If you are watching us for the first time, kindly follow us on our pages. On Facebook, we are at A Farmers. On YouTube, we are at A Farmers Media. And subscribe to our YouTube page. Subscribe, hit the notification bell, and then every time we're going live, you'll be notified. Every time you upload a video, we will be notified. If you just joined us today, we have a lot of videos on our pages. We've always had very interesting discussions. You can just go through them, find something might help you. You might as well share our page, our link with your friends, your colleagues. You never know who needs the information. Plus, information is power. So, the more the people get the information, the better the world gets. So, share the link. We will appreciate that. Before we get into the discussion, um, can I remind you a little bit about COVID? I hope you're not tired of listening to us about talking about COVID. Okay, if you are getting out of the house, you are going to a public place, can you kindly put on your mask? Let it cover your mouth and nose. Wash your hands regularly, or rather sanitize if you can't wash your hands. Keep social distance whenever you are in public. And if there's no need for you to get out of the house, you can always stay indoors. It always works, okay? Yes. So we are going to get into our discussion. Uh, I hope it will be a very engaging discussion. I do know of people who would like to share their stories with me, but you can always do that on our page in the comment section, and then I'll be sampling your feedback in the second part of the show. I'll appreciate that. Just as we are getting into the discussion, as you know, I always start with the quote of the day, anti positive vibes. I am saying today, if you can relate it with your life, the better. If you can relate it with whatever you're doing, that makes it perfect. So, my quote today says, you learn from failure than from success. You learn from failure more than from success. Okay? Don't let it stop you. Failure builds character. You learn from failure than from success. Don't let it stop you. Failure builds character. Character development. It's one thing we always joke about, like the way things fail to happen as you had planned, things go south. Like as we say in Oxidiana, character development. Failure is helping you develop your character. So the moment you are failing, please make sure you're getting up, okay? Maybe you failed yesterday, Monday. Make sure you're getting up. It's on a Wednesday. Get up, get moving. Sawa sawa. Tomatoes. So I came across a tomato in our kitchen and it's been cut. So I'll just show it to you. This is what a tomato looks like. This is a tomato. So depending on where you went to school, it is either a tomato or a tomato. So I don't know. I call it a tomato. For me, it's a tomato. That is a tomato for you. It was being used for cooking, and that's just what it looks like. What do you know about tomatoes other than it has a very bright red color? What do you know about tomatoes? How do you plant tomatoes? What are the conditions that you need in order for you to grow your tomatoes very well and achieve maximum productivity? What are the yields that you expect from your tomatoes? What kind of variety can you actually plant in your farm? That is what we are going to be discussing about. How do you go about from the transplanting, preparing the nursery bed? How do you do all these things? We'll be talking about that. And if you are a tomato farmer and you have this information, kindly share with us. We would like to hear from you. A person working on the ground will give us better information. So today we will be covering the first part about tomatoes. Tomorrow we will be doing something about the pests and the diseases that affect tomatoes. So if I am to take you scientifically, a tomato is a fruit, but it is used as a vegetable, okay? A tomato is a fruit, but it is used as a vegetable. I guess you didn't know that. You know it as a vegetable. It's the same thing we keep confusing with things like we have cucumber. Yes, cucumber is the word. They keep confusing us, but a tomato is a fruit, but it's used as a vegetable. How do you use your vegetables? Most of the people use their vegetables in cooking or rather in salads. Others take them raw. Others actually use them in more added form. So like tomato sauce, tomato paste, tomato jams, the people who use that, like when it has been added value to it. So depending on where you are at and how you use it, that's how most people use the tomatoes. How beneficial are these tomatoes? How do they help us? What are their nutrients? How do they help our bodies? So we've been having COVID around, okay? And we are being told to consume more fruits so that we can boost our vitamin C. Boost our immunity through consuming vitamin C. Tomato has vitamin C. It has plenty of vitamin C. And as you all know, vitamin C helps us boost our immunity. When you boost your immunity, you are ready to fight diseases that come into your body. Okay? Yes, that is what vitamin C does for us. On the other hand, tomato has vitamin K. Tomato has vitamin K. The vitamin K is used to help us in our bones. Okay? It helps us in our bones. It also has potassium. Potassium helps us in heat production in our body and helps us maintain the temperatures. You did something in high school about, was it? It was in Form 4 about temperature regulation in the body. That is what tomatoes help us to do. And then you see this bright red color. This bright red color is because of a certain compound known as lycopene. It is known as lycopene. Lycopene mostly is usually in the skin of the tomatoes. And research has showed that lycopene can actually help you prevent you from getting cancer. It lowers your risk to getting cancer. And recently, we've seen a lot of cancer cases. We know a lot of people who are dying because of cancer and other stuff. This this vegetable can actually help you prevent you from getting cancer. Also, it helps you prevent you from getting heart disease. So it reduces your risk to getting heart disease. So you see, it has numerous beneficial aspects, meaning it is good for us to consume. And then the fact that you can consume it raw, you can consume it cooked, you can consume it in your salads for people who like going the healthy way. And you can even have it in form of your tomato sauce. I know a lot of people who take fast food and you always have a tendency to use tomato sauce and everything ketchup. It can be used in that way. And in that way, you still get to consume the lycopene that it has, and it helps you in your body. So those are the beneficial aspects of tomatoes. Now, I want to tell you something that maybe you as a farmer, you don't really care about or wouldn't be very necessary for you. You might find it not being important, but the tomato is in the Solanaceae family. Crops are classified in families. So you have certain crops belonging to one family. Tomatoes are in the Solanaceae family. In the Solanaceae family, we have tomatoes, we have capsicum, we have the nightshade. Nightshade is managu. I will remind you, managu. Managu for kisses know it as managu. And then the titles call it munavu, if I'm not wrong. It is munavu, according to you. It is in the same family with also capsicum. Capsicum is pili pili hoho. For those people who actually prefer to call it sweet pepper, red pepper, green pepper, that family. They are in the same family. And potatoes, did I mention potatoes? Yes, they are in the same family with potatoes. These crops tend to be affected by the same pests, the same diseases. But the moment you already know that, now I will get into the details of what you should not do, the fact that you already know it is in the Solanaceae family, when we get into the planting aspect of this vegetable. What are the factors that you would really look into when you decide to get into tomato farming? Let's start with this aspect. Right now in Kenya, we consume a lot of tomatoes, okay? You can always find your market in schools, in hospitals. Every household uses tomato. I don't think there's a household that doesn't use tomatoes. So the market is there. The market is there. It has always been there. It is not reducing anytime soon. It will always be there. So if you want to get to tomato farming, there is market for you. You can actually identify it from your local place. If you already have markets, good. But before you get into tomato farming, I advise you get the knowledge before you get into the farming. Yesterday, when we were doing a foundation of crop production, we said something about getting the knowledge. If you can find actually a farmer who can walk you through it, like someone who's done it, it is even better. You can't find one, find an expert. Because we don't want you investing so much money into this tomato farming and then it collapses. Like you find so many challenges along the way until you quit. Mm-mm. We don't want you to waste your money like that. So find the knowledge, Kwanzaa. Like in your place, are people growing tomatoes? Do you have market for it, Sawa? Are the conditions favorable for it? Are you going to be growing it indoors or you're using like outdoors or you're using a greenhouse, okay? So find the conditions if they are favorable about it. Can you acquire the information about how you grow, how you manage the tomatoes, and even the pests and diseases? Because I think it is the biggest challenge that most people have. So we have these big tomatoes, and then if you have grown up in the rural areas, you know those two small tomatoes, very small, they are called cherry tomatoes. I think my producer can find an image for you and put it on the screen. Like the small tomatoes called cherry tomatoes. Actually, I remember my mom never cooks them. Like she doesn't cut them. You see the way I have cut this one. The cherry tomatoes, my mom never cuts them. She takes them from the shamba, she just washes them, and then she throws them in the food. Apparently, she finds them to be having better flavor than these other tomatoes. I don't know how it works for you. I don't know which one you find to be having better flavor. She finds the cherry tomatoes to be having better flavor. So we always have them in our garden, which we work with, which is okay. But there are these other tomatoes which are okay. So you find the information that you need about growth management, the pest and diseases, how you harvest, how you store. We covered a little bit of that yesterday as we were discussing the whole process of crop production. So you find out all that information before you get into tomato farming. And should I say, I will advise, can you start small as a first timer? Yes, it makes much more sense if you start small. Start small. Small for you can be 1 acre, half an acre. The moment you do that, like for one season, you are able to, like on the ground, you can identify now the pests, you can identify the diseases, you can always identify how much water you need, how much fertilizer you need. Like you get the basics, such that when you go get into commercial farming, you're doing it in a very easy way and you're not straining in any way. You already have the information. You know how to deal with the challenges that you get. You know how to manage. So start small. If you really want to start small. Work with an expert to guide you through, or work with another farmer to guide you through. We will get into the whole process of where we have to start, what we need to do, what we don't need to do. But we have several things that you have that need to be factored in for you to be growing tomatoes, okay? These factors are dependent on especially where you are. So we start like For tomatoes, they really require well drained soils. Like they deserve well drained soils. So if you are in a place where the soils tend to have logging issues, water logging issues, it will be a little bit tricky for you to grow the tomatoes. So if you have well drained soils, your factor number one is good to go. And then we have the issue of varieties, depending on what you really want to do. Recently, we have varieties that have been produced, the hybrid varieties that are able to resist some pests and some diseases. If you can also acquire information about that, better, and know which variety can grow in your area. Because I find there are tomatoes you can grow in dry places, there are tomatoes you can't grow in dry places. And for you to achieve maximum productivity, also we will be talking about how you manage your tomatoes while they are growing and how you control the pests and the diseases in your tomatoes. Sawa. So you look at all those factors. You look at your environment in terms of soil. You look at the variety you need to grow, and then you look at the management. Your management will determine your productivity. Your management will come in terms of support. We'll be talking about that a little bit. And then it will be in terms of managing the pests and diseases. So we have like two types of tomatoes. We have determinate tomatoes, and then we have indeterminate tomatoes. So determinate tomatoes, they always grow up to a certain length and they're done. Like they grow up to 1 meter and they are done. And then they fruit, they maliza. And then we have indeterminate tomatoes. They can always grow to 2 to 3 meters. Very long. Okay? And then most people in the field actually grow, when you are growing it in open air, most of them grow determinate variety. So you can either choose to grow your tomatoes in the fields, in open field, or a greenhouse. More commercial farmers are doing their tomatoes in greenhouses. Reason being, in a greenhouse, you can actually manage the climate. Like it's like a microclimate that you can control. So you can control the temperatures, you can control the humidity. Get the most conditions that you need, like the most favorable conditions that you need. You can always do that in a greenhouse. In a greenhouse, it's actually you reduce the attack of pests and diseases. They can't easily get in, so you reduce the risk of pests and diseases as compared to when your plants are in the open field. In the open field, you can't always do much about it. You can't manage the temperatures, you can't control the climate. If it decides to pour for the next 3 days and the water is logged, the field gets logged, plus the temperatures are very cold, it will happen. But in the greenhouse, you can always control it. For me, if I was to be asked, would you do it in a greenhouse or in open field? For commercial purposes, do it in a greenhouse. It's better. It's better. You can always manipulate everything around to work for you in order to increase your productivity. Sawa sawa. So that is like what kind of tomatoes we have. And then we have hybrid tomatoes that have been developed. And these tomatoes actually they can resist several pests and diseases. That's how they've been made. Which more people are preferring because they tend to actually even have higher yields. The moment you have less pests, less diseases, you are spending less money, so the management gets easier. And then they tend to have higher yields. It's the one thing that people will look at, and it's what actually most farmers will decide to plant. What are the conditions that you need to grow tomatoes? The first condition I said, the soils must be very well drained. You can't function in waterlogged soils. Your tomatoes can't grow in waterlogged soils. You need well drained soils. Most people prefer the loamy soils. They are well drained. They make it very easier. Let me give an example of Kenya. In Kenya, we can actually grow tomatoes in most places. Right here in Nairobi and this sides, we use tomatoes from central Kenya, from Oloitoktok. Tomatoes still grow in the Nyanza part of Kenya, in the western part of Kenya. Tomatoes can grow in most parts of Kenya, which is a win for Kenya. Our conditions are very viable. But if you are in any other place, tomatoes do well in well drained soils. So make sure that your soils have proper drainage in order for your tomatoes to grow well. They prefer conditions with moderate to high humidity. So make sure the humidity of the place is really good. The pH. So when we are talking about the pH, it's about the soil. The pH of the soil needs to be 5.5 to 7.5. And you can't know that personally as a farmer unless you use an expert to help you out. Yesterday, when I was talking about land preparation, I talked about doing a soil test. It's the same thing. You are getting into tomato farming, you have to do a soil test. So get yourself a soil scientist, a soil expert to help you with the soil test. The soil test, they can determine the pH of the soil, they can determine the nutrients that are in the soil, the nutrients that are lacking in the soil, and they can always tell you if you have diseases in your soil. So by the time you're getting into farming, you are doing it the right way and you will get benefits, proper benefits from it. So it's very important that you do a soil test. It will give you some clarity of what needs. So the pH I've said should be 5.5 to 6.5. Sawa. If the pH is very high, most times we apply lime to make it lower. Sawa. If the pH is very low, actually you apply gypsum, and you apply lime in order to adjust your pH. So you have low pH, you apply lime to increase your pH, okay? You have high pH, you apply gypsum to decrease your pH. So get it at the right levels that you need, 5.5 to 7.5. And you can only identify that by incorporating an expert, a soil scientist, who can help you do that. Determine for you the pH, determine the nutrients in your soil, and give you advice on what you're supposed to be doing. Yesterday, when we were talking about land preparation, we also said we don't apply fertilizers in the soil just because we can. You need to know, what nutrients do I have? What nutrients am I lacking? What fertilizer can I apply in order to boost these nutrients? At what rate can I apply in order for them to grow well? Okay. What are the temperatures that you can actually use to grow these tomatoes? Tomatoes prefer moderate temperatures. So any temperatures below 12 degrees, you are going to be getting freezing injuries. Any temperatures above 27 degrees, you are going to have low fruit set, meaning like you won't have as much fruits as you should, so your productivity will be reduced. So your temperatures, Chazia, 20 to 24. Not very hot, not very cold. Hiyo ni mchana. Usiku inacheza 15 to 17 degrees. Hapo tu, usiende juu sana, usiende chini sana. You'll be good to go. So if you are in a region where you get very high temperatures or very low temperatures, do you understand why I was saying it's better if you use a greenhouse? That's where a greenhouse comes in handy. A greenhouse will help you control the temperatures. So your temperatures have to range. They have to be very moderate if you need maximum productivity of your soils, of your tomatoes. Sorry, of your tomatoes. Sorry, those are the conditions that you need. We've talked about soil testing. So if you are getting into tomato farming, that is what you start with. People have always planted tomatoes using either seedlings or seeds. What seeds, yeah? Okay, seedlings, you are always assured of your tomatoes germinating. With seeds, people gamble kidogo too. If you're not very careful about it, you gamble kidogo too. But as a farmer, you can actually prepare your own seedlings, like grow your seeds, and then you can get your seedlings from your seeds. And you can't grow your seeds like basically in a field, open field. No, you have to establish a nursery in order for you to grow your seeds. So the next thing you'll be thinking of, if you have all these factors considered and put into place, the next thing you are getting into will be field, the nursery establishment. So a nursery, it's like a small plot to kidogo to si kubwa. I just want you to understand a very small plot. So depending on the size of your farm, and how much seeds you need, how much seedlings you need to grow in your farm. So you will be growing them. We always do like 30 by 100. Yes. So like 100 by 30, if you can. Good for you. That is okay. That will be enough for you, like for a small nursery, like a small one, like one caplot hivo, another one. If you can do that, good. So in these caplots, you can use a stick. Like the spacing has to be from this plot to the next, from this line to the next line. The spacing is 15 centimeters. So this is the spacing between the rows. So you have your first line, your second line, your third line. So it's 15 centimeters and then 15 centimeters. That works for you. The spacing between the rows should be 15. You can actually do it very easily. Just draw a line in that place that you want to grow your seeds. Use a stick actually. After you've established like your nursery, you can just use a stick. Draw your lines. Draw your lines. They will work for you. That's where you'll be using to grow your seeds. But how do you prepare this nursery really? Because you want very well drained soils if you need these tomatoes to grow. And then remember, have you ever seen a tomato seed? They are this small. They are this small. So in order for them to germinate, you really need very fine soils, very fine, in order for them to like sprout. So you have to really do a very fine till on your soil before planting the seeds. A very fine till so that your tomatoes can sprout. Because the seeds are this small. If you don't do it well, they cannot sprout. Sour. So a very fine till, make the soil particles dogo dogo kabisa. And then now you've already done that. Your soils are well drained. Sindio, I've told you, you measure a distance of 15, 15, 15. That's the spacing between the rows. 15 centimeters and another 15 centimeters. The seeds are very small. So I don't want you to dig a hole. You can't dig a hole to put tomato seeds. Itakuwa blunder. They won't even germinate. So use a stick. You take a stick, just scratch the soil. Hivi tuju across, like in that whole line, you are good to go. That is good enough. That is like a depth of 1 centimeter. 1 centimeter is good enough. And then you can put your seeds along the whole line that you've drawn. So just put your seeds in that line that you've drawn. And then you cover very lightly. You don't put too much soil. You need these seeds to sprout. And because they are very small, you can't really cover them with too much soil. So cover them very lightly. And in order to increase the moisture content in the soil, we always mulch our nursery beds. So the moment you are done and you water the field, like you put your seeds and then water, mulch. Mulch. For other people also prefer putting a shade on top of it. Like you jenga a shade kind of ya nursery bed above it. So you like control everything under it. The conditions are not very harsh. They favor the growth of the tomato seeds. A tomato takes approximately 7 to 8 days for you to see it sprouting. 7 to 8 days. Kwa hivyo patience is key. These are not beans that you'll be seeing after 3 to 4 days. You have to be patient, like a whole week plus, and then you will be able to see your tomatoes sprouting. So 7 to 8 days. In the nursery bed, they always stay for about 4 weeks. So you will leave your tomatoes in the nursery bed for about 4 weeks. So every day you are regularly watering your nursery bed, which is very important. Regularly water your nursery bed. Very important. And then when you are remaining with like 1 to 2 weeks before you transplant, you start reducing the amount of water that you put into your plants. This helps with it's a thing called hardening off. Hardening off helps the plant actually adapt to the conditions such that by the time you are transplanting and you are taking it to the field, it doesn't get transplant shock. When you see the conditions you have in a nursery bed, you have shaded, you have put mulch, and the conditions are very favorable. So the moment you want to remove these crops from this point A to take them to the main field, they are most probably going to die if you don't harden off before you get them out of this other nursery bed. It is like you are preparing. You are preparing them for what they expect in the field. So you start kidogo kidogo, lessen the water. Unaanza kutoa mulch kidogo, like lessen the water, remove the mulch kidogo kidogo, like everything, decrease everything such that they adapt to the conditions even before they get to the field. So we've talked about the factors that you need to consider in order for you to start getting into tomato farming. We've looked at the conditions that are favorable, and I have told you the temperatures are very moderate. The rainfall is at around 600 millimeters. Everything has to be very moderate. Your soils must be very well drained. Your pH ranges from 5.5 to 7.5. I have told you about how to prepare a nursery bed. So when we come back after the break that you want to take, we are going to be talking about how you transplant them and how you manage them in the field. Okay? In the last bit of it, I'll be looking at some of the varieties that you can actually grow and what are their desirable characteristics that makes them favorable for growth. We'll be looking at that. But if you are a farmer out here and you are into tomato farming, you can keep sending us your information. Tell us what you do. Share with us your experience on our Facebook page. We are at A Farmers. On YouTube, we are at A Farmers Media. I'll be sampling that when we come back after the break, and we will get more into this discussion because we don't know who is getting into tomato farming, who might be interested. We hope that the information actually helps you get into it. And then tomorrow we'll be looking at pests and diseases. So make sure you are also staying tuned in tomorrow as we wrap up about tomato farming. So we'll take a short break. We'll be back in a few. Don't go anywhere.
As we quickly progress from agriculture to agribusiness, market is key. Join us every Wednesday as we bring to you Market Watch, a show that covers candid discussions regarding the state of the market. Tune in and let's turn our farms into businesses.
One of the most important activities on our farms is scouting. Why is it important? Because you get to know what is affecting your crops on a daily basis. Join me, Noah Nasiali Kadima, every Tuesday, 7:30 p.m., where we guide you to attain knowledge and grow profits.
Are you a farmer facing challenges in your farm? Pests, diseases, or even unsatisfactory produce? Worry no more. The solution is here. Join us every Tuesday on Diagnostic Tuesday, where we talk about various issues affecting agriculture and interacting with experts with knowledge in different sectors of agriculture to provide you with appropriate solutions, giving hope to farmers to attain better yields, to achieve financial success and development. Our farmers attain knowledge and grow profits.
Agriculture is the art and science of cultivating the soil, growing crops, and raising livestock. Agriculture provides most of the world's food and fabrics. It is not only a source of food and income, but also creates employment opportunities for many people in the world. Over 1 billion people worldwide work in agriculture, generating 2.4 trillion for the global economy. The global impact of farming on the environment is revealed that 40% of the Earth's land is now given over to agriculture. Agricultural development is one of the most powerful tools to end extreme poverty, boost shared prosperity, and feed a projected 9.7 billion people by 2050. And we, the Our Farmers Media, roll the carpet for you as we welcome you to our thrilling farm visits to different farmers that educate and inspire you in different sectors in agriculture. Catch us also on our shows on all our social media platforms as we bring you educative and informative information that will help you learn and guide you on your agriculture journey to success. Our farmers attain knowledge and grow profits. A very good morning to you. How are you doing? Have you woken up well? How is your morning? This is the Breakfast Show. I am your host, Lillian Thomas. Before we went on a break, we started on our discussion about tomato farming. And we've established the conditions that you need in order for you to practice tomato farming. And we've looked at how to establish a nursery bed whenever you want to do tomato farming. We are getting more into that discussion in a few, and as we get more into it, we'll be talking about At what point do you transplant? How do you transplant? And then talk about the management whenever it's still growing until we are done. And later on the show, we will be talking about the varieties that people can grow, more specifically, more especially right here in Kenya. I wouldn't know about other places, but for Kenya, I'd give you a few varieties and give you the desirable characteristics. And if you are a farmer and you are doing tomato farming, you can as well tell me what kind of variety you are planting, in what region you are in, and how is it doing? What is the yield of the variety that you are planting? We said tomatoes have a very big market. People use tomatoes each single day. They do. Every household uses tomatoes. You can always sell them in restaurants, schools, hospitals. Like you have ready markets everywhere. As long as you do your marketing well, you will always have market for it. But you need to do it right. You need to do it right. And that's what we are trying to help you establish right here. So that you can do it in the right way, so that you can make your profits. Okay? Right here at Farmers, we help you attain knowledge so that you can grow your profits. Sawa sawa. So just pay attention, and then tomorrow we'll be looking at the pests and the diseases that actually most people find whenever they are doing tomato farming. And we'll try to look at the solutions. So we hope that this conversation is being informative to you. It is being educative to you. We usually have these discussions every morning on the breakfast show. So if you have a friend who would like this information, share the link. Share the link. Inform them of our page. Keep liking and subscribing to our pages, and we'll be more than glad when you do. Sawa? I want to remind us today again our quote of the day. Our quote of the day says, "You learn from failure than from success. Don't let it stop you. Failure builds character." You learn from failure than from success. Don't let it stop you. Failure builds character. I think we'll get a little bit into that at the end of the show. It will make more sense. And then I'll be giving you a farming tip also towards the end of the show. It is Wednesday. A quick thing that I can say. So Wednesday, we really don't have a theme for Wednesday, but I think as from next week we might be having Wellness Wednesday. So Wellness Wednesday, it's all about your mental health, your physical health, everything in terms of your health, emotional health, and everything. For me today, I will tell you the thing that I said when we started the show. Tomatoes contain lycopene. Lycopene helps you by reducing the risk of cancer and heart disease. So, Wellness Wednesday, consume more tomatoes. They will help you not get cancer, they will help you not get heart diseases, okay? So, that is it for me. Next Wednesday, we'll find something for that. I want to look at your feedback and see what you've been saying, and then we'll get back into the discussion. But you can keep sending me your feedback on Facebook. We are at our farmers. On YouTube, we are at our farmers media, and then I'll keep reading them as we continue with the show. But as for now, let me see who has talked to us right here. Mother Mohammed from County 001, that is Mombasa. Mother Mohammed says, informative, thank you. We are glad that you are watching, Mother Mohammed, and we are glad that you are always here for our shows. Thank you. And then I have Gil Zambika. He says he is following from Kitwe, Zambia. Thank you, Gil, for watching. How is Zambia? How are you doing? Are you a tomato farmer? What happens when you are growing tomatoes in your country? How is the market there? What are the challenges that you face? How do you go about with your processes in terms of management, growing, harvesting? Really would like to know. If you are a farmer and you are doing this, you can let us know. Before we went on the break, we started on what tomato farming is, and we discovered tomato is in the Solanaceae family. And this family, we said it includes potatoes, it includes nightshade, it includes pepper, like the pili pili hoho, the green pepper, the yellow pepper. I know you know it, the red pepper. Commonly, people call them sweet pepper. Sour. It's capsicum. They are in the same family. Let me tell you something about crops in the same family. Crops in the same family tend to be affected by the same pests and diseases. So if I grow tomatoes in my farm for this season, it is advisable that I should not grow another Solanaceae family crop in my farm for the next season. Take a break. Take a break. Get another crop. Take a break. This helps to reduce the pests and the diseases in the soil and in the crops. Sawa. If you were growing capsicum in the last season, in this certain plot, you cannot plant your tomatoes in the same plot again for this season. You will be putting yourself at a higher risk of pests and diseases in the same farm. So if you are dealing with Solanaceae crops, make sure you are rotating them. The moment you grow tomatoes here right now, don't bring in another Solanaceae crop in the next season. Take a break for another season and then you can bring back another crop, okay? That will make more sense. And it will help you reduce the pests and diseases in your farm. Meaning you will reduce the costs that you use in pest control and disease control, which is very advisable. So just have it in mind. I've told you it consists of potatoes, the nightshade, capsicum, more commonly known as sweet pepper. So mostly you can identify with the green peppers, the yellow peppers, the red peppers. And for people who talk Swahili, it is pili pili hoho. You can't plant them in the same place. You have to keep rotating. This season, rotate it with another crop in the next season, and then you can always bring it later. Before we went on the break, also we covered about the conditions that you need. Tomatoes do well in well-drained soils. They don't grow well in waterlogged soils. So make sure that your soils are well drained. The pH in your soil should be 5.5 to 7.5. And you can only determine that by the help of an expert, more likely by the use of a soil scientist. They can always come and do a soil test for your farm. They will tell you the pH, they will tell you the nutrients you have in the soil, the nutrients you are lacking in the soil, and they can advise you on what to do in order to get the optimum conditions that you need. Make sure that you are working with an expert if you are a first timer. And I told you, start small, start small. For first time, first season, you can always start small. There is no shame in starting small. The moment you start small, at least you get to learn. You know how to manage. You get to know about the pests and diseases. By the time you are getting into like full-time commercial production, you are aware of what you are dealing with. The temperatures also have to be moderate, so around 20 to 24. And I've told you, most places in Kenya, if you are in Kenya, you can actually grow tomatoes. Here in Nairobi, we use tomatoes from central Kenya, from Oloitoktok. When you go to Nyanza region, these people still grow tomatoes and they do very well. We have very viable conditions for the growth. So make sure that everywhere you are growing them, the conditions have to be very favorable, very favorable. Very cold conditions have a little bit of a problem because of the chilling injuries. And also for very hot places, there's also another problem. If you grow tomatoes in a very hot place, they are likely to develop fewer fruits as compared to a place with moderate temperatures. Fewer fruits will result to low productivity And that means less money. And we said it's a business. It is agribusiness. It's a business we are doing. We want more money. We want greater profits. And if we want greater profits, we just need to do things the right way, in the right conditions, in order for us to achieve the results that we need. So we also talked about growing seeds in order for us to obtain seedlings that we can transplant into our field. And I said tomatoes have very small seeds, really small seeds. They need minimal depth in order for them to sprout. So a depth of 1 centimeter, the better. So you don't dig a hole whenever you are planting tomato seeds. Just use a stick, simply, like, this is layman. You use a stick, like on your field, just use a stick to draw a line in your nursery bed. That is good enough. And then you can put your seeds and then cover very lightly, water, mulch in order to contain your moisture content in the soil. And then I said, before we get into transplanting, like 1 week or 2 weeks before transplanting our seedlings, we have a thing we call hardening off of the plants. This is whereby you are trying to make the plant get ready. I'm trying to explain it in a layman's language. You are preparing the plant to get ready for the field conditions that it will get. So you start by reducing the amount of water that you are supplying to the plant. So you reduce on the water. You remove the shade. If you had put shade in your nursery bed, remove the shade. So expose your plant a little bit. You remove the mulch. Expose the plant. Like, let it get ready for it to be transplanted to the field, such that when it goes to the field, we have an aspect called transplant shock. If you don't harden off your crops, the moment you get them into the field, it is just as it is. It is like you are shocked. The conditions are very different compared to what you had. So, most probably, they won't grow. They won't adapt to the conditions. So, prepare them in advance before you take them to the major field. Depending on where you're growing, whether it is in the open field or it is in the greenhouse, hardening off is very important. Harden off your crops before you take them for transplant. So, right about now, I want us to get into transplanting and about management. We said tomato seeds take 8 days in order to sprout. Like, for you to start seeing a tomato growing, it takes around 8 days. So it's like a week plus. Needs patience, okay? A week plus. And then after a whole month, it will be ready for transplanting. It takes like 4 weeks for it to be ready to be transplanted. So at the third week, you can start hardening off. So you can start reducing the amount of water you apply. You can start by removing your mulch. Come and remove your shade at around 3 to 4 weeks. And then after 4 weeks, you will be transplanting. You are transplanting into where now the crop is supposed to be established. And again, it's the same thing that we said, well drained soils. You need well drained soils for the establishment of the crop. So till your land very well, and then make sure your soils are well drained. When transplanting, we always advise transplanting is usually done when the soils are wet. So we never transplant our plants when the soil is dry. So before transplanting, make sure that you have watered your crops while still in the nursery bed. Make sure that they have a little bit of moisture. The soil has a little bit of moisture. Because when you are transplanting, you are uprooting. It's not like you are cutting, you are uprooting, and you need it to come out with the roots and a little bit of soil. in order for it to be able to be established in the new field. So you have to water the field, water the nursery bed just before you transplant. Make sure it is a little bit wet so that it will make it easier for you to uproot. And when you are uprooting, make sure your plants have some soil on it. It increases the establishment rate after transplanting. You've had cases whereby someone transplants and then, like, your crop doesn't have even a little bit of soil, and then you take it to establish it in the field. Most likely, it will not be established. The conditions kidogo tu zinakata. What is the best time for you to transplant? In the morning or in the evening? I don't think there's anything done in agriculture time jua imewaka. So you either wake up in the morning or you are doing things in the evening. Yesterday when we were also talking about pest scouting, we said you do it in the morning or in the evening. Transplanting in the morning or in the evening. Harvesting in the morning. Like everything we do has a very precise time. So you transplant your crops in the morning. Okay? Water your field. When you are transplanting, make sure it comes out with a little bit of soil to enable it to actually adapt and to establish faster in the new field. Sawa. Do it in the morning. The conditions have to be right. That is how you transplant your crops, and then now you take them to the field where you want to plant. You have tilled your field. We advise, if you can get compost manure, kindly do. Mix it in your soil, because for tomatoes to actually grow very well, they need a lot of organic matter content. The organic matter content can always be obtained from the manure. If you can find manure to mix in your soils, better. Mix to ensure that you have enough organic matter content. Also, when the manure helps in the drainage. So your soils will be well drained, which is very, very recommended. I've told you, you can't work in waterlogged soils with tomatoes. They will not grow, they will not be established. Yesterday, I talked about something about spacing and how spacing is important if you are to achieve maximum productivity. The space that you put between your crops and between your rows determine how the crops absorb nutrients, how they absorb sunlight, they are exposed to sunlight, so it reduces even the competition. For tomatoes, the spacing is usually 45 centimeters between the plants and then 60 centimeters between the rows. So 45 centimeters between the plants, 60 centimeters between the rows. And that is the proper spacing. We've said you need to do this right. That is the proper spacing. 45 centimeters by 60 centimeters. The hole that you are going to be putting your seedling in, let it not be more than 15 centimeters. That is the maximum. Let it not be more than 15 centimeters. So everything, it is precise. Did I say farming is a science? It is a science. You have to be precise about every single little thing. From the measurements of the fertilizers you apply, how you apply your water, at what time you do things, it has to be very specific. It is a science. So just have that in mind. You have put your plants in the field. So there's always this issue about fertilizer application. So people always just go like, when you plant your tomatoes, apply this amount of fertilizer at this rate. Your field and your neighbor's field are not the same. Nutrients that you have in your field and that they have in their field are not the same. Whatever you lack and whatever they lack are not the same. Can the fertilizer application be the same always? No. Back to the drawing board. Soil science, this is where it comes in. Like they will always tell you, the moment they've already established, they've done the soil science test on your soil, they've established the pH for you, the nutrients you have, the nutrients you lack. If you have any diseases in your soil, they will let you know. And then they will advise you accordingly. So the fertilizer application that you do is always advised by an expert. It's not something that you just come up with. You have to be advised by an expert. And that's why I told you, work with an expert. If you are starting these for the first time, work with an expert. They will just take you through the whole process until you get to the end. As you come back for the second season, you have an idea of what you are doing. But let me say there are critical moments when you need to apply fertilizers. So when you are actually putting your plant in the soil, in order for it to be established, more specifically the root formation, and yes, the root formation, you actually need to apply some fertilizers to help with the root formation. At the beginning of flowering, your plant tends to need more nutrients in order for it to flower. So make sure that according to the advice you've been given, you know the fertilizer you are applying and at what rate you apply them. They are always doing top dressing during the growth. Mostly it's done like 4 weeks after transplanting and then another 8 weeks after transplanting. But But the fertilizers you apply will be determined by the soil test you did. Sawa, just do your soil test kwanza and then you can always know how to apply your fertilizers. Sawa? As we are going on a break, you can keep telling me if you are doing tomato farming, what you are doing, what are the challenges that you are facing, how do you go about with your process? We really would like to know your story. How do you go about with your process? What variety are you growing in your area? What are the yields? And so good so far. How is the process for you? Let me know on our page on Facebook. We are at a farmers. On YouTube, we are at a farmers media. So just let me know. I'll be sampling that when we come back. And then I told you, we are almost wrapping up with the management after you've established in the field. So we'll wrap up on the management and give a few highlights of the varieties that are grown in Kenya and their desirable characteristics. And then maybe you can tell me in your area, what variety do you grow? We'll be looking at that, but that will be after we take a break. So make sure you're staying tuned in, and then we'll be back in a few.
Melon is a trailing vine in the gourd family. The word melon can refer to either the plant or specifically to the fruit. Watermelon is a type of melon that is sweet and refreshing fruit. Watermelons can either be grown on home gardens for small-scale farmers or large-scale depending on the market demand. You can either transplant or plant watermelon seeds directly. For best performance, plant watermelons in hot, sunny locations with loose, fertile, well-drained soil that is rich in organic matter. It is best to plant watermelons on raised rows and ensure that the soil pH is between 6.0 to 6.8. On average, it takes around 3 months for a watermelon to grow from seed to mature fruit, with smaller varieties having shorter growing times than larger varieties of watermelon. Watermelon growing, if done rationally and on a scalable basis, can be a good source of income.
Mic check, unanisikia? Is my sound okay?
Stand by in 5, 4, 3, 2, and 1. You are on air.
Join me, Conrad Kibe, on the Farm Drive every weekday from 2 p.m. to 4 p.m. right here on A Farmers Media, where we tell you the story of an African farmer. We give you COVID-19 updates, and most interestingly, we give you the pan of the day. Follow us on all our social media platforms at A Farmers with a Z at the end on Facebook, and definitely A Farmers Media on YouTube. See you there. Allah. Allah.
Sorry, a little bit of technical challenges, but a very good morning to you. How are you doing? Are you well? Did you wake up well? How has your day started? How are you finding the breakfast show? Right here, we've been talking about tomato farming since the beginning of the show. So we've discussed several things about tomato farming, from the conditions we need, factors you need to look into before getting into tomato farming, and we were looking at how you need to do it. So we started by growing the seeds, transplanting, and now we are at the management stage. And we want to be looking into that on this part of the show, and we'll also be looking at some of the varieties that people are growing, more specifically right here in Kenya, that are working for them. I don't know what varieties that you might be growing in your area. I'm not really sure, but you can let me know. If you are a tomato farmer and you've been doing tomato farming and you'd like to share your story with us, let us know. On Facebook, we are at Facebook. On YouTube, we are on Facebook, we are at a farmers. On YouTube, we are at a farmers media. So let us know. Give us your comments. Give us your feedback. You can as well let me know where you're watching the show from. And if you have any questions, you can as well let us know. So today we are looking at how to grow the tomatoes. Tomorrow we will be looking at the crops, pests, and diseases that you find in tomatoes. If you have a farmer who would like to know this information, or you know of someone who might be wanting to get into tomato farming and might need this information, kindly share the link. Let them learn. As you are getting educated, also let them get educated. And we will be very glad when you do that. A quick reminder again of our quote today. Our quote today says, "You learn from failure than from success. Don't let it stop you. Failure builds character." You learn from failure than from success. Don't let it stop you. Failure builds character. Just have it in mind, and we will be looking into it kidogo as we wrap up the show. And then at this moment, I'll be giving you the farming tip before we wrap up the show. So make sure you're still staying tuned in for that. If you have any queries, any comments, just write them in our comment section on Facebook. I'll be sampling that as I wrap up the show. And just getting back into our discussion, we have talked about how you establish a nursery, what you need to do for you to get it right. And then we've talked about transplanting, what you need to do. And we said when you are transplanting, we transplant in the morning, and then you have to water your nursery bed right before transplanting in order for you to be able to easily uproot the crop that you are transplanting. Also, when you are transplanting, make sure you transplant with a little bit of soil to help in easier establishment in the new field. Sawa, that is okay for us. Fertilizer application. When you are applying fertilizers, it's only determined by the soil test that you did. So you'll be able to know the soil, the fertilizer that you need, and at what rate you need to apply. I told you the tomato needs a lot of nutrients in some critical points, especially during flowering. You need a lot of nutrients. So make sure that if you don't have enough nutrients at that time, that you are top dressing your tomatoes in order for you to get the produce that you need at the end of the period. Right about now, we want to look at the management. So it's all about weeding, watering, pruning, the things that you really do whenever you have tomatoes in your fields or in your greenhouse. Tomatoes require adequate water, they require enough water, but make sure you are not overwatering. Make sure you are not overwatering. You are not applying excess water such that the soils become waterlogged. Everything you do has to have a measurement. So apply your waters according to the requirements that your plants need. If you apply excess water, the soils become waterlogged. Tomatoes are more likely to develop diseases in waterlogged conditions, and then in sometimes they actually die. They actually die in waterlogged conditions. How do you apply your water? Just as every crop, we mostly apply water in the morning and in the evening when the rate of evaporation is quite low, in the morning or in the evening, depending on whatever you method you are using. Most likely you are using irrigation method. If you are using irrigation method, drip irrigation is the best method to use because the plant gets adequate water at the right point, like the water is applied whenever it is needed, right where the plant is. The plant is able to absorb the water. There is a risk with overhead irrigation. When you use overhead irrigation, you encourage the spread of early blight. You encourage the spread of early blight. Early blight is a disease that we will be looking at tomorrow when we are doing the pests and diseases. We'll be looking at that tomorrow. But it is a disease. When you use overhead irrigation, you tend to spread it even more. Even right now, as we've been talking about fungal infections that affect our crops during this rainy season, we found that most infections are usually spread during the rainy season as they are scattered. It's the same thing that will happen when you use overhead irrigation. You tend to spread the disease even more. You need to constantly weed your crops in the field. You need to constantly weed the crops in your field. Yesterday, we mentioned that weeds actually compete with the crop for nutrients, for water. Sometimes they grow and you are actually even competing for sunlight. Sometimes they grow and cover the major crop that's supposed to be growing here. It is important that you continuously weed your farm. Get rid of every weed that you have. Weeds at some point actually harbor insects and pests. Like unapata tu zimeka magonjwa mob, pests zenye hautaki iko nazo. If you get rid of them, you get rid of pests and diseases in your farm. Because some of them depend on these weeds for their survival. So make sure you are constantly weeding. And you can always weed in dry conditions. In wet conditions, more diseases are spread. So don't weed during wet conditions. You can always do that during dry conditions. But make sure you are constantly weeding your farm to get rid of the weeds, to discourage the competition that might happen with the tomatoes that are growing in your shamba. So if you have seen a tomato crop, especially maybe growing in a greenhouse, my producer will be putting up that for you. My director will do that. You find like I talked of determinate and indeterminate tomatoes. So the determinate tomatoes grow to a height of 1 meter. The indeterminate tomatoes, they grow so high, 2 to 3 meters, and they tend to be weak. They need support. They need to be supported right from the young stage. As you transplant them, you need to start supporting them. So my director will be putting up an image for you to show you how tomatoes are supported whenever they are being grown. So you support them and you use poles and a string and a wire. So you have like 2 poles and then you have a wire connecting the 2 poles, and then you have a string. You tie the string on your tomato and then tie this string to the wire that you have that is connecting the poles. It helps support the tomato and it can grow and fruit without bending, without breaking. Okay, it can always do that. Make sure you are supporting your tomatoes very well. For the more literate people, they call it staking. But for us, can we just use a language we understand? It is supporting. Support your tomatoes so that they don't break and the fruit set occurs well. You don't want your tomatoes to start breaking because they are weak, because they are growing very tall and the fruits are very heavy, so they end up breaking. Support your tomatoes. That happens during the management process. While you are also managing, pruning is usually done. You always prune, just as you do with the other crops. The diseased leaves, the old leaves, you always prune these things. Make sure you are doing it weekly because I will tell you one thing for sure, especially the diseased leaves, the old leaves, they tend to be having diseases and pests. So the moment you are not pruning them, your crop gets infested. So make sure you are pruning these things regularly. And I'd advise if you can do it weekly, better. Do it weekly. You prune weekly, you get rid of old leaves, deceased leaves. And also, sometimes you find when your crop is growing, there are shoots that are growing that are actually absorbing nutrients, but you know they won't develop fruits. You don't really need them. Instead of them consuming your nutrients for no good reason, you prune off such shoots. You prune them off, and it will help you a lot in the establishment of the crop. It helps even the crop establish in a way that the whole crop can get sunlight, enough sunlight that is needed for photosynthesis and to make food. And when you prune leaves that are close to the ground, early blight is usually removed away. It is done with. So we established that when you are pruning, make sure that the leaves that are close to the ground are also pruned in order for you to get rid of early blight. If you can do that, that is a hack for you. Those are the management things that you can always do in your field, depending on where you're growing your tomatoes, whatever variety you're using. And because when you have grown your seeds, they grow for 1 month until you get your seedlings and transplant. After transplanting, now it depends. Tomatoes grow from averagely 75, 70 to 90 days averagely. So it's 3 to 4 months. 3 to 4 months, you have your harvest. You are good to go. If you are working in a greenhouse, do you know that is like 3 seasons of you harvesting in a whole year? Mhm. How good is that? How profitable is that? Like you can do it during the whole year and you can actually harvest 3 to 4 seasons, which is good enough. I asked you if you are a farmer and you've been growing tomatoes, what variety has been doing very well for you? How expensive is it? Is it expensive? The management practices, are they manageable? What conditions do you grow your variety in? Do you live in a dry area or in a rather not so dry area? Because I find that different varieties grow in different conditions. So, where do you live? Where do you live? Where are you doing your farming activities? What are the conditions like? And what variety is doing very well in such conditions? We are going to sample a few of the varieties that have been grown in Kenya. And these varieties, you always buy them from an agrovet. So, an agrovet, you can always be advised on the best variety to grow in your region. Make sure that you are growing the best variety in your region that will give you maximum returns. But the choice of variety will be dependent on some few things: the disease resistance capability of the variety, if It is determinate or indeterminate depending on you, because you see, we've said for indeterminate varieties you need to support them because they can grow very tall. Some people find it to be quite costly to do that. So that depends on what you're doing. Also, your variety choice will depend on the fruit quality. Where is your market? What are you producing your fruits for? You find most people who produce for the fresh market, most Kenyans actually, they grow money makers. There's a variety called money maker. That is what they grow. Most people who actually produce for processing, like to be used for tomato paste and tomato sauce, there are other varieties that they grow. And the most common one is Roma VF and Nema 1400. So, depending on what you're growing, what you're doing, that is up to you. Your variety choice is dependent on these characteristics: what you're growing it for, the disease resistance capability, how expensive do you want to go, how cheap do you want to go, what is your capital, how much do you want to invest. It is all dependent on you. Let me sample a few of the varieties that are in the market right now that most people are growing, and then you can tell me what variety you grow, and you can actually see if you can get a variety that is conducive for your climate. So we have the Rio Grande variety. It has the red, very red fruits, and then they have a sweet taste. So the characteristics of this crop is that it can yield up to 18 tons per acre. That is the yield. 18 tons per acre. It takes 75 to 80 days to mature, and then it can tolerate fusarium wilt. So it has a disease tolerance. It is disease tolerant. It can tolerate fusarium wilt. Takes 75 to 80 days to mature. Its yield is around 18 tons per acre, and it grows very well in warm climates. Now that is the Rio Grande for you. I don't know where you are at, but you can try and find what can work for you. And then I have the Kilele F1. I am not going to be mentioning any industry that produces them, but these are the varieties. We have the Kilele F1. This is used mostly for people in the dry regions. If you are in the dry regions, Kilele F1 is the variety for you. It takes 75 to 85 days to mature, so more closely to the Rio Grande, but it yields up to 35 tons per acre. It's almost double the yield, 35 tons per acre. So it's 30 to 35 tons per acre. That's the yield size. It has a very long shelf life of 21 days. So for people who do not have ready market and you don't want really to get stranded with your crop, as you try to establish a market, Kilele F1 could be it for you. You are in a dry place, you don't have a ready market, and you don't want your produce to go wrong. The Kilele F1 has a shelf life of 21 days. Takes 75 to 85 days to mature. And then it's tolerant to certain diseases. It is tolerant to tomato mosaic virus and to nematodes. I think it's a win for me. If I am looking at a very good variety, you have a variety that is actually tolerant to diseases, has a longer shelf life. Just see what works for you. And then apparently it is growing in dry conditions. People in dry conditions can still grow their tomatoes and still get their harvest. And then I have a very common variety called Kaljay. Kaljay matures at 75 to 85 days. Its yield is at 12 tons per acre, and it is very easy to transport. Like hypertangy injuries haraka. Its skin is kind of tough kidogo. It doesn't get injuries haraka. But its yield it's around 12 tons per acre. Because it is open pollinated, it's not a hybrid variety. And you find for most of open pollinated varieties, they tend to have lower yields as compared to the hybrid varieties. So if you are comparing these and Kilele F1, Kilele F1 actually has higher yields. Those are the varieties that I have sampled for you. I have sampled for you Rio Grande, Kilele F1, and Calj. I think I'll sample for you one last one that really intrigued me. I will be sampling for you the Poster F1. Poster F1 it's a hybrid variety and it grows in warm climates just as the Rio Grande variety. It takes 80 to 85 days to mature, and then its yield can grow up to 180 tons per acre. That is a lot compared to all other varieties that we've talked about. Its yield goes to 180 tons per acre. It is tolerant to various diseases, so leaf mosaic virus and the bacterial wilt. And then for this variety, you can actually harvest it for a very long period. That's why you have like you can harvest like this whole 180 tons per acre because it takes a very long time as you harvest. And then it keeps its quality so good for so long. Mostly people, you can actually grow it in the greenhouse. You can grow it in the open field. It works for you. But I'll tell you one thing. Hybrid seeds, hybrid varieties are very high yielding, but they are also quite costly. So do your math. What works for you? Do you want the high yields? Good. Are you okay with the cost? Better. And then you find that they can resist a lot, several diseases. Those are the kind of varieties that are being grown in Kenya that are actually working for people that are doing very well. You can let us know what varieties you guys are growing and that are doing very well. So I want to share with you the farming tip. The farming tip. I told you I'd give you a farming tip about tomatoes. My farming tip will be refrain from using overhead irrigation as it helps in the spread of early blight disease. So you refrain from using overhead irrigation as it helps in the spread of early blight disease. We have finished our discussion right at that juncture. Tomorrow, we will be looking at the pests and the diseases that actually attack tomatoes. That's what we'll be covering tomorrow. If you are a tomato farmer and you can help us with, you can actually share with us your experience, we'd really appreciate if you do that. So, as we wrap up, let me read for you the quote of the day, which says, you learn more from failure than your success. Don't let it stop you. Failure builds character. Every time you get something very easily, you are most likely not going to pay attention to it. So you do something and you do it so well, like you're doing it for the first time and you do it so well. Most likely you won't pay attention to every detail that you used to do it. But you do something and then it flops. Trust me, you will have to find out what worked, what did not work, and what made you fail. So, failure is usually a learning process. People tend to learn a lot from failure. If you are failing at whatever you are doing, get up, get up. Hauna option ingine. There's no other option out here. You just need to get up and take your lessons. Take your lessons, implement them in the next level. Make sure you are not failing again. As we are wrapping up this, let me give you the COVID updates right here in Kenya as at of yesterday. Yesterday we had 629 positive cases out of a sample size of 5,832 cases. The positivity rate is at 10.8%. The recoveries are at 1,560. The deaths are at 18. The numbers are still high. A positivity rate of 10% is still high. Positive cases in a day at 600 are still high. Let us kindly keep the precautionary measures that the government has put in place for us. Put on your mask whenever you are in public. Let it cover your mouth and nose. Wash your hands regularly, sanitize, and also keep social distance whenever in public. If you have no business getting out of the house, stay at home. Help flatten the curve. Help flatten the curve by staying at home. For people in our 5 counties, Nairobi, Kajiado, Machakos, Nakuru, and Kiambu, get home by 8. Trust me, get home by 8. There are some things happening out here. Whenever you are found out at 8, you wouldn't like them happening to you. Make sure you are at home by 8. We'll be having our other shows coming up. We have the farm drive happening at 3 p.m. So make sure you're catching Conrad Kibe for that. I'll be here again tomorrow morning for the breakfast show. So make sure that you are with me here and we'll be having a discussion on pests and diseases affecting tomato farming. So if you want to learn more, make sure you join me again for the breakfast show and we'll be having a very interesting discussion. But as well, you can keep sending us your comments, any questions that you have on our page at Afarmers on Facebook, and on YouTube we are at Afarmers Media. Anything that you'd like us to cover for you, we will do that. You can just send us a message asking what topic you need to be covered, what issue you need to be addressed. We will do that for you. As you go on with your day, be an awesome person. Be kind. Be kind. More specifically, be kind. Like you don't know what people are battling with out here. Just be kind. It takes nothing to be kind. Just be kind. That's my word for today. Be kind. Until tomorrow, it is a goodbye from me.